There are moments in life when we realize how blind we've been. For Thomas Bennett, that moment came on an ordinary Thursday afternoon, when he returned home early from his law firm and saw something that would change everything. Thomas was a successful man by any measure. At 58 years old, he'd built a prestigious career, owned a beautiful home in the suburbs, and provided well for his family. But success, he would learn, doesn't always mean wisdom. His son David was 7 years old, a bright, cheerful boy who loved dinosaurs and drawing. David had been born with a condition that meant he'd use a wheelchair. Thomas loved his son deeply, but if he was honest with himself, he'd always felt a quiet sadness about David's disability. He wanted his son to have every opportunity, every experience, but he worried constantly about limitations and challenges. 6 months earlier, Thomas had hired Marie Johnson as their housekeeper. Marie was a woman in her early 30s with a warm smile and an easy laugh. She came 3 times a week to clean, do laundry, and help with light cooking. She was efficient, reliable, and pleasant. Beyond that, Thomas hadn't given her much thought. She was simply the cleaning lady. But on that particular Thursday, when Thomas walked through the front door 2 hours earlier than usual, he heard something unexpected: music and laughter. His son's laughter, bright and unrestrained, echoing through the house. Thomas set down his briefcase quietly and followed the sound to the living room. What he saw there stopped him in his tracks. Marie was dancing. Not just swaying to music, but really dancing. Her arms extended gracefully, her feet moving in deliberate, joyful steps. And David, in his wheelchair, was moving with her, his small arms outstretched in mirror of hers, his face lit up with pure delight. They were both laughing, caught up completely in the moment. "That's it, David!" Marie was saying, her voice full of encouragement. "Feel the music. You're doing beautifully. Now let's try that turn again." David spun his wheelchair in a careful circle, his timing matching the rhythm of the music. When he completed the turn, Marie clapped her hands together. "Perfect. You're a natural dancer, sweetheart. Do you feel how the music moves through you?" "I do, Miss Marie. I really do." David's voice was filled with wonder. Thomas stood frozen in the doorway, something tightening in his chest. How long had this been going on, and why hadn't he known about it? Marie spotted him then. Her expression shifted, becoming uncertain, perhaps worried she'd overstepped some boundary. "Mr. Bennett! I'm so sorry, I didn't expect you home yet." "I can explain." "No, please," Thomas said, his voice rougher than he intended. "Don't stop. I didn't know David was interested in dancing." There was a pause. Marie glanced at David, who suddenly looked shy, and then back at Thomas. "David's been asking me about it for a few weeks now," she said carefully. "He saw a performance on television and wanted to try it. I hope that's all right. I used to dance myself years ago, and I thought there was no reason he couldn't learn too." Thomas felt something crack open inside him. No reason he couldn't learn. How many times had Thomas himself assumed there were things David simply couldn't do? How many doors had he closed in his mind before David even had a chance to try opening them? "Dad?" David's small voice broke through his thoughts. "Are you mad?" "Mad?" Thomas crossed the room and knelt beside his son's wheelchair. "No, buddy. I'm not mad at all. I'm amazed. You looked wonderful out there. Will you show me more?" The joy that flooded David's face was like sunshine breaking through clouds. "Really? You want to see?" "I really do." Over the next hour, Thomas watched his son and Marie work through different movements. Marie had adapted everything thoughtfully. Some moves David could mirror exactly. Others she'd modified so that his wheelchair became part of the dance itself, spinning and gliding in patterns that were beautiful and intentional. She talked about rhythm, about expression, about the way dance was about feeling, not just about steps. And David absorbed it all, his concentration complete, his movements becoming more confident with each repetition. When Marie finally said it was time to stop for the day, David protested, but his flushed, happy face showed he was tired. Thomas helped him toward his room for a rest. But before David left, he turned back to Marie. "Thank you, Miss Marie. This is the best part of my week." After David was settled, Thomas returned to the living room. Marie was tidying up, putting away the small speaker she'd brought, straightening the furniture. She looked nervous. "Marie," Thomas said gently, "can we talk for a moment?" She nodded, her hands stilling. Thomas sat down, and after a moment she did too. "I need to apologize to you," he began. Marie looked startled. "Apologize? Mr. Bennett, if I overstepped—" "No," Thomas interrupted. "That's just it. You didn't overstep. You saw my son. Really saw him. You saw a boy who wanted to dance, and you helped him do it. While I—" He paused, struggling with the words. "While I saw only limitations. I've been so focused on protecting him from disappointment that I never stopped to ask what he actually wanted to try." Marie's expression softened. "You're a good father. Mr. Bennett, I can see how much you love David. Sometimes we just need someone else's perspective. That's all." "You've been teaching him for weeks," Thomas said. "And I never even noticed. I come home, I ask about his day, and he says it was good. But I wasn't really listening, was I? I wasn't seeing what was right in front of me." "It's never too late to start seeing," Marie said quietly. "That's what my own mother used to tell me. She was a wise woman, worked as a nurse her whole life, and she always said that people could surprise you if you gave them the chance." Thomas nodded slowly. "Tell me about the dancing. How did this start?" Marie smiled at the memory. 3 weeks ago, David asked me if people in wheelchairs could dance. I said of course they could. He asked how, and I showed him a video on my phone of adaptive dance performances. His eyes got so wide, Mr. Bennett, he said he didn't know that was possible. And then he asked very quietly if maybe I could teach him. Just a little. And you said yes. How could I say no? He wanted it so much. And I thought, well, I used to dance in community theater before my daughter was born. I'm no expert, but I remember enough to teach the basics. So we started with simple movements, just feeling the music, understanding rhythm, and he took to it so naturally. Thomas felt his throat tighten. He's never mentioned it to me. Not once. I think, Marie said carefully, he might have been afraid you'd say no. Or maybe he was afraid he wouldn't be good at it, and he didn't want you to see him fail. Sometimes kids protect their dreams by keeping them private, especially when they're not sure if those dreams are allowed. The truth of that hit Thomas hard. Had he created an environment where David felt he needed permission to dream? That evening, after Marie had gone home, Thomas sat with David at dinner. His wife, Catherine, was away on a business trip, so it was just the two of them. "David," Thomas said, "I want to hear about the dancing, all of it. Why you wanted to learn, what it feels like, what you love about it. Will you tell me?" David looked up from his plate, surprised, and then slowly he began to talk. The words tumbled out, all the things he'd been holding inside. How he'd seen dancers on a television show and felt something stir in his chest. How he'd always thought dancing was something other people did. People who could walk and jump and spin on their feet. How Miss Marie had shown him it could be different. How when he moved to the music, he felt free and strong and like he could express things he didn't have words for. Thomas listened, really listened. And with every word he felt his understanding deepen. This wasn't about pity or limitations. This was about art, about expression, about a young boy finding a way to say who he was in a language beyond words. "Would you want to keep learning?" Thomas asked. "Maybe with a proper teacher? Someone who specializes in adaptive dance." David's eyes went wide. "Really? You'd let me do that?" "Of course," Thomas said. "I'm sorry I didn't ask before. I'm sorry I wasn't paying attention. But I'm paying attention now, buddy, and I want to support whatever makes you happy." David launched himself forward in his chair, wrapping his arms around Thomas's waist. "Thank you, Dad. Thank you so much." Over the following weeks, Thomas did his research. He found an adaptive dance program in the city, run by professional dancers who'd developed techniques for students with various abilities. He enrolled David in a weekly class. He also asked Marie if she'd be willing to continue their private sessions, and he increased her pay significantly, not as the cleaning lady, but as David's dance mentor. Marie had protested the raise, but Thomas insisted. "You've given my son something precious," he told her. "You've given him confidence and joy. That's worth far more than keeping the house clean." Thomas started attending David's classes, watching from the sidelines as his son worked with other children and adults, all moving in their own unique ways, all finding their own relationship with music and movement. He met other parents, heard their stories, and realized how much he'd been isolating himself with his worries. One evening, about 2 months after that revelatory Thursday, Thomas came home to find David practicing in the living room with Marie. But this time, he didn't just watch. He asked if he could join in. Marie and David exchanged delighted glances. "Of course," David said. "Miss Marie, can you teach Dad too?" So Marie taught them both. Thomas felt awkward and clumsy, his middle-aged body unused to such deliberate movement. But David laughed with him, not at him. And gradually, Thomas felt something release in his chest. Joy. Simple, uncomplicated joy. As they moved together, Thomas realized something profound. He'd spent years focusing on what his son couldn't do, building walls of protection and worry. But David had never needed those walls. What David had needed was someone to see him as he truly was. Not a disability, not a limitation, but a whole, complete person with dreams and desires and capabilities that might look different but were no less real. Marie had given David that gift. And in doing so, she'd given Thomas an even greater one, the gift of truly seeing his own son. Months passed. David thrived in his dance classes and performed in a small recital that spring. Thomas and Catherine sat in the audience, watching their son glide and spin on stage, his movements confident and expressive. When David took his bow, his smile was radiant. After the performance, Thomas sought out Marie, who'd been sitting a few rows back. "Thank you," he said simply, "for everything, for seeing what I couldn't see." Marie smiled that warm smile of hers. "You see it now, Mr. Bennett. That's what matters. David's lucky to have a father who's willing to learn and grow." Thomas shook his head. "I'm the lucky one," he said. "You taught me that love isn't about protecting people from the world. It's about helping them engage with it fully and joyfully, exactly as they are." As he watched David laughing with his fellow dancers, still in his costume, still glowing with accomplishment, Thomas felt gratitude wash over him. Gratitude for a kind woman who'd seen beyond her job description. Gratitude for a son who'd been brave enough to pursue his dream. And gratitude for the lesson he'd learned, that sometimes the people we overlook are the very ones who have the most to teach us. It had taken a cleaning lady to show a successful lawyer how to truly see, and Thomas Bennett would be forever grateful that he'd finally opened his eyes.